Sarah Wilson, designer of Lila's Leg Warmers, and today I want to show you how to make the little lateral braid stitch that runs around the leg warmer. So to begin with, we're at the beginning of the round. We're going to do a lifted increase. So this thread that lies between the first stitch of the round and the last stitch of the round, I'm going to lift it onto the needle. Now I'm going to knit into the back of the second stitch on the needle. So I'm going to insert the tip of the right needle from right to left through the back side of the stitch. I'm going to yarn over and bring up a stitch. Now I'm going to knit into that first stitch, the stitch that we lifted. Then I can drop both of these two stitches off the left hand needle. So I now have two stitches in the place where we had one stitch. We're going to be decreasing at the end of the round the stitch that we created. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to transfer that first stitch on my right hand needle back to the left hand needle, and now I'm just going to repeat the process. So I'm going to knit into the back of the second loop on the left hand needle, then knit into the front of the first stitch, drop both of the stitches off the left hand needle, slide the first one back to the left hand needle, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. Now this is going to take me a few minutes, which you can see once you get going it is quite fast. So basically this is just a left leaning twisted stitch. It's one stitch over one stitch. We're passing the stitch to the left, but instead of just doing a left twist, we are carrying the first stitch that we increased across the top of the fabric in a horizontal fashion, and it makes this really cool effect. You can see that the stitch is actually just being passed across the top of the fabric. Now I do recommend that these be knitted quite tightly because they're going to loosen up quite a lot if you don't knit them tightly, and the result will be that the next round will be kind of loose. So you do want to knit them tightly. I am working magic loop and I have reached the end of the row, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the second needle into place, and then what I'm going to do, this stitch, the last one that was on the first needle that we worked, it's going to have to go onto the front needle. So I just took it off the back needle, put it onto the front needle, because remember, you're always transferring the stitch, the first stitch on the right hand needle back to the left hand needle so that you can continue the lateral braid stitch. So if you are working magic loop, you will have to transfer the last stitch on your first needle onto the second needle. Sorry, I'm trying to balance my camera between my knees here and knit at the same time, so it's not that it's a little awkward. But I do want to finish the round because I want to show you what happens at the end of the round in order to join the lateral braid. Because if you don't join the lateral braid at the end of the round, you're going to have a strange jog, and it's going to be pretty obvious that your braid doesn't meet up. I am not knitting these as tightly as I recommend because I'm just trying to show you how the process works, but if I were not trying to balance the camera between my knees, I would be knitting these much, much tighter. So, okay, now I'm at the last one. I have one loop left on my left hand needle, so I'm going to transfer this one back over, work the last braid. Okay, now I can take the needle out. So here's what you're going to do in order to join up the braid. Oh, uh-oh, I just pulled my needle out of all the stitches. Whoops, don't do that. Okay, alright, so just as before, I'm going to take this stitch off and put it onto the front needle, because remember, we're going to have to decrease a stitch. So what you're going to do, you're going to be knitting into the stitch below the first lateral braid. So here's the first stitch of the round. right there. This is the last stitch of the last round. This is the first stitch, and you can see that is the first lateral braid right there. I'm going to put my needle into the stitch below that lateral braid. I'm going to knit into it. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I need this first stitch not to be on the left needle. I need that first stitch on my right needle. So you're going to just, again, you're going to insert your needle into the row below the first lateral braid and knit into it. So now you've got a stitch here. What you're going to do, you're going to drop this first stitch on the left needle off of the needle. Okay? So now you've got the first stitch of the last round and the stitch that you picked up underneath the lateral braid. Here's how you're going to finish the round and join the braid. You're going to put the tip of your left needle into the second stitch, lift it up and over the first stitch and off the needle. We have now decreased by 1 stitch, so I still have the same number of stitches in the round as I did to start with. And now I have just worked the first stitch of the second round. So now I can just continue the round as written. So if the pattern says knit, you'll knit. And I just want to show you that if you do work the lateral braid stitch loosely, that following round is going to be quite loose. Do you see how loose those are? So you just want to work the lateral braid nice and tight. And I'm going to pull the needle through here and show you what that looks like the end of the round. And you can see that our lateral braid has been joined up in a nice fashion. And that's it. Now you know how to do it. See you next time, guys. I'm the Sexy Knitter. Stay sexy. Bye.